to 15. Partly to mostly cloudy skies tomorrow with scattered thunderstorms mainly in the morning with a high of 67. Southeast winds 10 to 20. And then showers ending by midday on Tuesday with a high of 56. Keeping you informed, News Talk 1090 WKVZ, the talk of Muskegon.
Renegade River in Spring Lake wants to buy your used handguns and hunting guns. Renegade River, your hunting, camping, and survival store. Stop in and check out their new and used firearms, sporting goods, Army and Navy supplies, and survival gear. Downtown Spring Lake, next to the police station. Be a survivor, not a statistic. Renegade River in Spring Lake has new and used handguns, hunting guns, sporting goods, and survival gear. Protect your rights and your freedom. Ask about their CPL classes. Renegade River, next to the police station in downtown Spring Lake.
The talk of Muskegon. News Talk 1090, WKVZ.
Welcome to the Mike Hewitt Show. My name is Mike Hewitt, and the studio is full today, folks. Listen, the topic for today is going to be, as we'll probably touch back and forth with it a few times as we go forward, but let me start with a little quote from the book I wrote, The America's Final Beginning. The quote is, "A system of great opportunity divided into thousands of little groups demanding extra protections and rights. For decades, the few had more rights than the many until the many were broken, leaving the great union of states ripe for the picking." And from Jim Riley's Muskegon Pundit, "Holy crap-oly, everyone is a victim." Hard to figure out which one of those is more profound, but I couldn't.
That's quite a profound comment. I would agree.
I couldn't resist the contrast. Hey, in the studio, Jim Riley with us, and also candidate Ken Berman. Welcome back.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Listen, as we go forward, we're going to kind of touch bases on that one. Yesterday, there were on that quote I offered from Jim and I. I'm going to touch bases later in the show on the ongoing drama over the Dewey Hill Cross. There was a big, gigantic rally yesterday in support of the cross remaining.
I like big, gigantic as opposed to just gigantic.
No, it was
big, gigantic is really, really enormous, gigantic.
This thing was humongous. Yeah. It was overwhelming. How's that for a word?
There we go.
Really was. Along with that, listen, if you happen to be on your way to thinking about getting married, you're not going to do that, are you, Jim?
Probably not today, because Sunday all the chapels are filled.
What
with,
about What about Honey Bunch? Maybe she wants. No.
Well, like I said,
she knows she don't want to get married.
The chapels are filled with the worshipers and gay rights protesters. So
listen,
there's no room.
Should you decide to go straight and marry Honey Bunch, you may want to contemplate giving Design to Dine. You can find them at www.design-2-dine.com. That might help. They do great catering, Jim.
Oh.
Just trying to help you and Honey Bunch.
Well, it's certainly a great way to start the Sunday afternoon.
Well, I didn't take us down that one path. You did that. I was just helping a sponsor. So, listen, Ken, tell us what's going on with the race. How's it going?
What is the race now? Let's
for folks that don't know, what is the race? Where is it? What is it? Who is it? What's happening?
I am the alienated Republican candidate for the 92nd House.
You can't be very alienated. I'm a Republican, and you're sitting here on our show.
You live in Spring Lake. You won't move up here and vote for me.
I thought about that for a nanosecond.
See how that worked?
And you're running against whom?
I am running against current incumbent.
Two-time incumbent,
Marcia Hovey-Wright.
Okay, and she is a Democrat.
She is indeed.
She has actually had a fairly easy run the last two elections. This would be her third and final opportunity to be a state representative. And
so she served 2 terms now, and she's fighting for her final term?
Yes, and that she would be term limited out after the third term.
And folks, if you've got a question for Ken while he's in the studio with us in his first segment, call the number 855-357-1911.
And we had some debates. I don't know if you had a debate up in Fruitland Township, and there was a little kind of a coffee chat, I guess they called it, at the M Live Muskegon Chronicle Galactic Studios in downtown Muskegon, which I attended that one. How did you think it went?
I felt as though I engaged the individuals that were there. I know that there were some people there that were there to support Marcia that ended up asking for signs at the end of the forum.
From you?
From me.
Okay.
In fact, one of them has become very active on my Facebook page. I complained that Steve Klusterman had misrepresented the forum on MLive, and this gentleman engaged Steve Klusterman with what he had seen go on there. And interestingly, what he saw and I saw were very similar, and what Steve Klusterman reported was vastly different.
Well, as someone who's attended a lot of public meetings and then seen the reportage afterwards, it is breathtaking how two people can view the same event and come up with totally opposing analysis and understanding of what happened.
That tends to be self-serving. If I want to see something the way I want to see it, that's how I'm going to see it. I think that's a human nature. So if some of those folks are leaning because their ideology calls on them to be leftists, then that's how they're going to see it from that paradigm.
Well, and that's a really good point. And of course, we on the right, and I think even those in the middle, actually, I think even those on the left are now admitting that, in fact, the media tends to be very, very heavily left.
But they
the
still
reporter
pretend.
he's referring to is at the Chronicle is I don't know what his politics are personally, but I know the way that he writes gives me
he's a leftist.
Enormous amount of information.
What I've always
he's on the left.
I've always found that whole concept fascinating because it's so disingenuous or frankly dishonest. Because I don't make any bones about where my politics is. I don't come on the show and say, for the next hour, I'm going to be talking about the news. I tell you flatly, I'm going to be talking about the news as I see it. I'm going to do it honestly, but it's from my vantage. It's how I see it. I wish they would do that.
Well, and I think what I found was people that attended had very good questions as to how we stood and how we felt about various things within state politics and more importantly, Muskegon County. And I engaged them and answered their questions straightforward and accurately as best I possibly can, and as I have since entering the race. And Marcia kept picking up a newspaper and trying to refer back to how she had answered questions in the past,
Right.
And was not engaged and clearly didn't seem to care about anybody that was there.
Tell me this, just because I don't know. So for me and listeners, what's your platform? What are you running on? Have you got 2 or 3 or 5 or 100 points of?
I am a firm believer that we cannot beg for jobs, but we have to fight for jobs for Muskegon County.
Okay.
The actual unemployment rate in Muskegon County is 20.3%. So 1/5 of our populace is without work. Everybody knows in any studies that have ever been done that crime rates go right along with unemployment. Marcia claims that it's the other party's fault and that she would do so much more if the other party would let her. She is more than willing to go and beg for scraps from the governor's table. I'm not willing to beg. I'm going to go there and knock the table down.
I guess this. I'm don't take this wrong, but I'm a little perplexed by the position you articulate for her and yours. And let me tell you why. I don't think that the governor has jobs in his pocket that he can pass out. Listen, I'm not a big fan of the governor. Having said that, the last thing in the world that Mike Hewitt wants is to place the government in a role of providing jobs for anybody, because I don't think they're capable.
Absolutely, Mike. I couldn't agree more. What I want to see is us utilizing the funds and the services through MEDC effectively for this side of the state. The governor uses the economic arm to reach out for businesses around the country to move here to the other side of the state. I define I-69 as being the cutoff point. MEDC has completely ignored this area, and I understand that the governor has proven time and time again that he looks at this as being a Democratic-held territory, so why should he pay any attention here? My take is that we can force MEDC to effectively utilize some of their marketing skills to bring business here. Looking at new businesses around the country, specifically on the West Coast, that are techie and young companies. This is the kind of environment that young techies want to be in. They want to play in the lake. They want to go skiing. They want to play in the woods and hunt and do whatever other activities they've got in their mind. And this is the most economically affordable place for them to come and play. Where else in this country can you live right on a great big body of water like this for $300,000 plus your taxes?
Well, but you're suggesting and perhaps I misheard you, but the only tool, if you will, that you are suggesting that would be utilized in this is Michigan's Economic Development Corporation, which has a pretty easily definable history, which is one of just abject failure, really, in terms of money spent, promises gotten, and results achieved. What else?
No, not at all. I'm looking at, we've got several groups here in Muskegon County that are designated to try and bring new business here. The county hired a new coordinator to work with economic development. He was hired back in June, I think, and he is supposed to be looking at ways that he can bring business or help drive business here to Muskegon County. He's not doing that job.
What I wished he would do, not to cut you off, but what I wished they, as a total government, would do is stop collecting those proceeds from taxpayers and let people take that money and invest it as a free market enterprise would. To me, it's fascinating. For almost 200 years, America built from absolutely nothing to the greatest economy in the world, and suddenly, somehow, somebody 30 or 40 years ago decided that only government can provide these things. So we're going to collect all of the funds up possible in the government and then pass them out as we see fit to the people we decide should be winners.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I look at, there's an organization here in Muskegon County called West Michigan West Michigan Growth Committee, I guess is now their new name. And the West Michigan Growth Committee is designed to go out, market Muskegon County to the rest of the country, try and lure new businesses here. It's an independent group that's self-funded. Again, they're getting stonewalled by our government, and to me, that's a major error.
Couple months ago, my family from out of state came in, and we all gathered and did a tour of where we grew up at down in the Pontiac area, and it was kind of a fascinating thing. But the reason I'm interjecting that right now is downtown Pontiac looks like a ghost town. They've dissembled. They've gotten rid of their police department. It's absolutely a dead city. And right downtown, there's an office for the Congressional Democrat offices there. Their local county party is situated there right next to the Economic Development Corporation office. I took a picture of it because the three of them side by side was flatly, sadly laughable. They don't work.
No, and I think government-controlled economic development generally doesn't. But if you can utilize some of their marketing tools to enhance those things that are being done by individuals within your city, I think that there are opportunities there. What I'm seeing is that we're turning down business. Muskegon Area First several years ago was offered by, I think it was AT&T, offered to bring a 200-seat call center here to Muskegon County. And they were told by Muskegon Area First and the county commission that those weren't the kinds of jobs that we wanted for Muskegon County. You can't do those kinds of things and climb out of the unemployment rates that we've got.
But isn't that the problem when you leave employment, you leave jobs, you leave those decisions to elected politicians who certainly in our state are, or in our county in particular, are union-driven, who are absolutely openly against non-union businesses. If we're going to focus more power, more control, more money in the hands of elected officials, and they will in fact be those who will be making the decisions and interacting with companies, is that the best way to go about it?
I'm not suggesting that that's the way that it should be done. What I'm suggesting is that if we're going to have money spent around the state to bring business, if we're going to have our governor traipsing around the countryside bringing in new business for the other side of the state, all I'm asking is that let's spend some of it here. Let's do something here productive.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Let me ask you one other question. A big issue coming up. We know that it most likely will be voted upon shortly after the November election, and that is what will the state do to come up with money to repair the roads that the state has responsibility for? in the one event that I attended with you and your Democrat opponent, there was much angst, and everyone in the room was in absolute 100% agreement that the roads were terrible. They needed to be fixed. I didn't hear a single response as to where the money would come from.
Well, my response was that we need to make sure that the 19 cents gas tax that's being paid actually goes to repair roads.
But then that would be taking money from something else. So, again, where will the money come from? You can't just, we know this, the state government is not going to take money from schools, for instance, and put it in roads without filling that hole. So you need new money. You can't just move money around. Any money that's moved around will leave a hole that some other pressure group, some very politically powerful pressure group, is going to say, wait a minute, you can't take our money. So where's the new money going to come from?
I don't know as though we need to have new money.
Okay.
I think that what our obligation, should I be elected, as a legislature, is to meet our obligations first. You can't take money and shift it someplace else and wonder why the earmarks for that particular fund aren't taking place. We've got a legislature that for 34 years has underfunded teacher retirement, and now as the shortfalls have come into play, they want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. If we don't like what's written into the Constitution, then bring it up as a constitutional amendment. Let's fight on it.
Ken, listen, do me a favor. We're out of time. Tell voters how they can find more information out about your candidacy.
If you go to my Facebook page, it's Ken Berman for MI 92nd. On there, my contact phone number, email address. I'm the easiest person in the entire world to find, and I certainly would appreciate any help that any voters can
Spell
give.
Berman. Spell Berman.
Berman.
There we go.
Very nice. Ken, thanks for joining us again.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Folks, we'll
Jim?
be right back.
You're listening to News Talk 1090, WKBZ.
Welcome back to the Mike Hewitt Show. Jim Riley, that was kind of a fun segment, wasn't it?
Well, it's always interesting to get an opportunity to talk with someone who would like to be elected as a candidate, and to me, it's important to get responses. And of course, you know, there's only so much time that you can do, but we want to know how well thought out the important issues are. And I think that I liked what I heard, but I wish more people were more interested in the true differences between the candidates, and in particular in the results of what people say ought to be, you know, accomplished, or at least the ways that they ought to be moving forward. When in particular you can see the same thing was tried some years ago. How did that work out?
Not so well.
Well, sometimes it worked out well, but
didn't you used to be in the financial industry?
Yes, I was.
You worked with companies or individuals?
Both.
The reason I'm asking is one of our sponsors is Polano Consulting. They work with small businesses. They do financial consulting and management consulting. Did you know that?
No, but it's much more important today than it's ever been. I can tell you that.
If you were a small business and you wanted some help, you should probably go to PolanoConsulting.com.
Spell Polano.
PALANO Consulting.com.
PALANO. You know, just a quick little story on this. I just happened to read earlier in the week, Lowe's Corporation, which of course is not a small company, but companies of any size need some expertise. Lowe's company has, of course, sells building materials among many, many other things. But one of the biggest things that they sell is lumber. And, of course, everyone in this room, and probably everyone within hearing distance of this radio show, has heard of a 2x4. It's a piece of wood, piece of lumber.
I've had people threaten me with 2x4s
and
before.
It can be a weapon. I'm sure there are folks that would like to ban 2x4s because someone got bopped on the head by a 2x4. But in this case, anybody who's done any building or knows anything about a 2x4 knows that they are not, in fact, 2 inches by 4 inches. They're a little bit less. And California, because that's California, they just have any number of new laws every week. But they decided that folks were really confused, didn't understand what a 2x4 was, and they required that a common description, is their term, must be followed by the actual dimensions of the lumber, and it must be attached to each piece of lumber.
Imagine an entire state where 2/3 of the populace are offended victims.
Well, in fact, that's exactly right. Not so much that they were victims of knowledge, but they were victims of not having a piece of paper, a label put together by lawyers who are interested not in imparting information, but basically setting up a gotcha. Anyway, along the short of it is that apparently the attempts that Lowe's Corporation in providing the correct information, it was incorrect. According to this new rule, they were just hit with a $1.6 million settlement. Now, this is they settled for this, so who knows what the ultimate or the original thoughts were. Again, if you need expertise, if you're going to get into business at any level, you need experts because the laws are coming at the county level, at the township level, at the city level, at the state level. I mean, they just keep coming every day.
But when you go to all of those meetings, there's virtually no citizenry there to say, hey, stop it.
No, it's only the people who want the laws, and of course, in many cases, especially at the state level and the higher levels, they are these issues are pushed by lobbyists.
Folks, we're going to take a call. Let me stop
for
you
lawyers.
right there. Welcome to the Mike Hewitt Show.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. And I apologize for a couple of missed ones before. I know you let people know I'd be on, and but I guess it's your anniversary, so I'm glad to be part of it.
Listen, everybody. Well, who we have on the line right now with us is Dr. Rob Steele. And listen, Dr. Rob, if you weren't busy, I'd be concerned. So, working in the hospital, today's a day, as I understand, typically you're at the hospital and working. So missing my show is not a big deal when I know you're down there saving some people.
Yeah, appreciate that. So did the families we were working with.
No question about it. Listen, I understand that you're a candidate. What are you running for, Dr. Rob?
I'm sorry. I'm a candidate for University of Michigan Regents, which is on the statewide ballot, so all of your listeners over on the west side of the state will be able to vote for me. I'm on the Republican side of the ballot, and first name on the ballot, actually, Rob Steele, and these positions are very important.
Dr. Steele, this is Jim Riley. I'm sitting here next to Mike. Just a question. If you are one of those voters who prefers to vote straight ticket, in other words, let's say in this case that you wanted to vote straight Republican, if you voted straight ticket, would that also include your candidacy?
Yes, it would. That would be a vote for me, and a vote on the other side would be a vote against me. If you've got friends on the show there that they vote for some Democrat candidates and some Republican candidates, and they want to make sure they still get to the Republican side of the ballot for the University of Michigan region and cast their vote. These are very important votes. These boards are literally run the university. These universities are somewhat like the Vatican or Monaco. They don't report to any other entity. They don't report to the governor. They don't report to the legislature. They strictly report to the board. So the board sets the policies, the budgets, and really determine what happens at these universities.
You know what I've learned this year, Dr. Rob, and I genuinely didn't know this before. In fact, our own Senator Jeff Hansen up here was the first one to inform me. And then later, Senator Arlen Meekoff. We've had both of those on the show a couple times. And
yeah,
the thing that I learned from them and that I'm wanting to share with voters and why I'm excited to have you on the show is that our Michigan Constitution demands that the state legislature provide funding to these types of schools, specifically state-level universities here in Michigan. But that same portion of the state constitution doesn't provide the legislature with any oversight, and so the only oversight we have to go with what happens to our tax dollars are electing people like you. And I hear a lot when I'm out campaigning for other candidates or things that I've done in the past with various political groups. I've heard people say, I don't even know what a region is. Why would I vote for that? And listen, to your point, it's hugely important. It is the only way that we can get our hands around these universities. And my example would be, since 1980 forward, income in America, and specifically Michigan, has doubled. It's went up. It's doubled. What our income was in 1980 is double that now. But tuition has went up 800%. And so to have good, solid, fiscally conservative, intelligent people sit on these boards is just critical. It's gotten to the point now, it used to be when parents had a child that was going to go to college, it was kind of a joke, well, you're going to be broke for a while because your kid's going to school. Now the reality of it is the kid going to school is turned into a mortgage level loan that affects that student for mostly the rest of their life. It's just gotten out of control. We need people like you sitting on those boards.
Yeah, well, thank you. And of course, the reason that tuition has skyrocketed so dramatically is because these universities understand that really it's going to be the federal government and ultimately the taxpayers funding these tuitions, and so it's actually a direct transfer payment from the federal government and taxpayers to these institutions of higher learning. That's one of the reasons why one of my big proposals is to eliminate federal student loans to these students and use the endowment, the University of Michigan's $9 billion endowment, use that as the bank. They can easily borrow money at 1%, loan it back to the students at 4%. My belief is that the people running the endowment and the university should feel there is no more conservative, safer investment available to them anywhere in the world than the investment in their own students and the product of their institution, the education they provide these students. Listen,
I got to tell you, Dr. Rob, I don't have a class envy problem at all, and we talk about that type of thing on the show often. But reading an MLive article from back in the spring where the top 16 executives for U of M are making an average of $1 million apiece. Listen, if they were generating that kind of revenue because of their efforts, I'd be the last guy to throw a stone at them. But most of them are working darn near part-time jobs. And I try to find a way to say, how are they generating that revenue to justify that? And I can't find it. To me, those things seem absent of common sense.
Yeah, and you mentioned the state appropriation. The state appropriation is actually fairly small relative to the total budget, and that's another key point. The budget at the university is $6.9 billion, or $6,900 million, and the health center, medical center, and medical research is $3.6 billion, or $3,600 million. And so 55% of the budget is the health center and the medical system. And, of course, I was on faculty at the medical school for 20 years and involved in clinical research my entire career. And so there's no one on the board that actually has the experience that takes up 50% of the university. And 7 of the 8 board members currently are attorneys. So, the law school budget's about $50 million. And so having someone with my expertise on that team running that large university would be extremely helpful from just that point of view, which, of course, in my view, that aspect is completely nonpartisan. But when it comes to expenses and spending, it's really crazy. I mean, they have students going into debt to finance sushi chefs and wood-burning pizza ovens in their new living quarters. They redid a dormitory recently, and they spent the same amount on that. They could have built every 4 students a 4-bedroom house for the amount of money they spent renovating a building that was already there. So the budget there is out of control. They spend tons of money that could be better spent on education, and there's just no reason to spend it on luxuries and perks. They have 50,000 applications and only 6,000 accepted. So people aren't going to go there based on whether they have access to a wood-burning pizza oven. And the other point I would make there is you mentioned the taxpayer support university, and of course, only 46% of the students this freshman class were from out of state.
Wow, that's astounding.
So our taxpayers deserve better because these students, they don't get in, they leave the state, they never come back.
That imbalance has been brought public some years ago, maybe decades ago. And the University of Michigan was chastised for it publicly and then promised to rectify that. How did we get, you said 46% of the freshman class is in-state or out-of-state?
Out-of-state. 46% is out-of-state, up from last year where it was 40%.
And of course, we subsidize, or at least the students at University of Michigan get a very significant per student, per annual subsidy in state and federal funds up in the multiple thousands per student per year.
Well, the higher education, actually, they are not subsidized per student. They do get a state appropriation.
But the loans that are involved.
From the legislature. Yeah, from the legislature. And they can use that state appropriation however they want. So there's no strings attached to the money that the state government gives them. Though the federal government certainly uses their funding to control dramatically what happens at the university. They use Title IX and a whole bunch of other things attached to federal funds, and they say, you do this or we're taking away your money. So, of course, the federal government, Office of Civil Rights, Department of Justice, Department of Education, they lay out these crazy rules, and the universities jump to, regardless of how how inappropriate they may be because the money is tied to it.
Dr. Rob, would you have it? Would you have, assuming you win, and I'm certainly praying you do, as sitting on the Board of Regents, would you have an effect on any of the curriculum side of the questions I might have at a university?
Well, we certainly could through recommendations and change in the mission and distribution requirements. I mean, certainly the regent's job is not to meddle specifically into individual classes and that sort of thing. But, it's interesting. There is data out there that, higher education does have its own academic study of the process of higher education. And there's actually peer-reviewed studies out there that show that 40% of colleges, the students attending these colleges, these 40%, know less as a junior than they did when they came in as freshmen.
Right. What I find fascinating,
That's stunning.
It is stunning. What I find fascinating, Dr. Rob, is things like just a couple of examples. A brother-in-law of mine wants to go to law school, so already had an associate's he was a police officer, and part of the he has to, as you're more than aware with your education, you're stuck off on these side branches taken. In his case, introduction to China. So I'm asking myself at the time, what in the heck does he need to be taking these elective courses? Because they force you. You're going to pick from this a la carte menu all of these nonsensical things that you absolutely don't need, will have no bearing on your career whatsoever, and you're going to pay a lot of money for them. These things, to me, are just absolutely insane. A friend of mine lives down in Illinois, he had a double major, computer science and mathematics, and he also had bowling 101, and then the next year bowling, and you just kind of shake your head. Where are they coming up with these things? And to me, they're designed solely and only to bilk young people and their families.
Yeah, well, certainly there is an issue in higher education where the administrators and the people running these universities are highly motivated to get more students into their university so that they can collect the tuition money. And I've seen in a small local private university down here around Ann Arbor, they just started a football team. This is a school with 1,500 people in it. And they don't need a football team and have never been interested in having a football team, but they started a football team because they know that guarantees them a certain number of students that will be coming there to play football. They'll be coming there to try out for football. They'll be coming there to maybe be in the band. They'll be coming there to maybe be cheerleaders. And so having a football program, even though that program will lose a dramatic amount of money and it doesn't serve any mission, it serves the mission solely of getting students into the university and with them attached those federal loans and resources from the families.
In retail, there's always the push between volume, generating volume and gross profit versus volume. But when I look at it, in the percentage in Michigan, at least the last time I saw the number, of high school graduates that then find themselves graduating from a 4-year degree is roughly 25%. And I think to myself, if they could A, bring the costs down, and B, shed themselves of some of these nonsensical courses, we may have a lot more people that graduated from high school then go on and finish up a four-year degree. Am I off base with that kind of thinking, Dr. Rob?
Well, certainly there's a need to have a skill and education to participate in the more successful parts of our society. That's unequivocal. Whether that requires a 4-year college degree, I think, is going to be open for some debate in the incoming years. That was always felt to be true. But now the explosion in kids attending college, we know that over 50% of them are having difficulty finding a job, and that only somewhere around approximately 20% have a job in the field they studied. So we certainly have a lot of kids attending college that's not preparing them to further success in the job market, and so that's key. So I think there's a lot of kids going to college, and some of them may be taking some of these kinds of courses you referenced, and it's not helping them really. There certainly is a lot of room for improvement when it comes to skilled trades, vocations. We know in the state of Michigan there's tens of thousands of welding jobs unfilled. We know there's tens of thousands design jobs, damn skilled trades, tool and die, all these sorts of things in Michigan that are hurting now. And so not everybody needs to go to college, but these administrators want people to go to college because that's, their budgets, the bigger their fiefdom,
sure.
And this sort of thing. So
sure.
There's some issues there for sure.
To your point, I know that Davenport and Adrian College, just as examples, are using their athletic programs as their number one mode of operation to grow. Listen, Dr. Rob, we're out of time for this segment. How can folks find out about your candidacy?
Well, I have a website, Dr. Rob Steele for Regent, or you can Google it. It pops up really quickly, Dr. Rob Steele Regent. And, they can see my prescription for the university, Dr. Steele's prescription for the university, and there's a whole host of things on there, everything regarding distribution, public office hours, transparency, you name it. University doing more to recruit students to stay in the state of Michigan by giving them tuition refunds. Everything's there, Dr. Rob Steele for Regent. If people want to throw me a few bucks there and make a donation, they can do that right online by clicking the button as well. But I really appreciate your time and getting some issues out there.
Dr. Rob Steele, thank you very much. I look forward to having you back on after you win.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
All right, folks, we'll be right back.
Yep. Bye-bye.
I did. I'm good. Well, welcome to the Mike Hewitt Show. My name is Mike, and listen, now we've got, along with Jim Riley, we've got Matt Wiedenhoff. Matt, you're a candidate again.
Yeah.
What are you running for?
I'm running for the school board of Grand Haven area's public schools.
Where does that cover? What area?
Grand Haven, the city, the township, Spring Lake Township. Actually goes into Muskegon County a little bit over by Ponaluna, like Shoreline Landing apartments. They're part of it. And then just south of Holland area.
Terms are those 6-year terms? Am I right?
They normally are, but mine's actually a 2-year term. They are on a rotating schedule. So that what happened before was they were basically turning over the entire board at the same time as a possible opportunity if everybody resigned or retired from it. So they decided to actually overlap them now. So every 2 years, they'll bring in a certain number of members so that the whole board doesn't turn over at once.
Okay, I got to ask you 2 questions, then I'll let you take over. The first one is why are you running?
Well, when I ran as a state rep candidate, education was a big thing. And I went to one of the meetings, and a couple of the ladies on the board had said, hey, if you happen to lose, would you mind running for the school board?
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, of course, right?
Is that why you're not on the ballot and you're a write-in candidate?
Yes. The deadline for it was July 27th. Our primary was August 5th. And I wasn't going to file, so.
You missed the boat.
Yeah, I missed the filing date to actually be on the ballot.
That was because of the State House primary race.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now tell voters, tell people listening, you say education's your passion, but what's your back? Do you have any credibility in this area? Or is it like Jim and I thinking we're educators?
No, I actually have credibility, unlike you guys.
Okay.
I figured I had to give you a stinger. No, I teach at Davenport University.
You can turn off his mic, right, Oscar?
You can turn off theirs, though, right? I teach at Davenport University and Baker College, and it's funny, just had Dr. Steele on here running for U of M Regents, who I really admire what he's doing because there's a big problem with that area. But I teach there at those 2 schools in business and management and economics and accounting. So I do have a background in that. I also coach. I've coached since I was 15, coaching inline hockey with kids. Currently at Grand Valley State coaching. So it's kind of weird. I have a Grand Valley who's a huge, huge rival at Davenport. So I go from teaching there to coaching at Grand Valley. So I have a lot of passion into seeing people grow as students, players, whatever it is I'm dealing with.
How's the media treating you?
Well, I sent out a press release. I got nothing. No publication on that.
Okay. Do you think that's because I know you're a Republican?
Oh, man, I'm going to go with yeah. I did get an interview the other day, but they interviewed all of us,
right.
And that's the only thing I've heard from them. And like I said, they didn't publish my press release. I guess I wasn't juicy enough news, unlike some of the other people involved.
Okay. Well, but as I understand it, tell me if you're not. I don't want to get into the other candidates, but as I understand it, you're the only actual educator of those candidates. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
To me, though, I put my 4 daughters graduated from that district, and so I watch it closer than I do some other races because I there's a certain amount of association from me. And I got to tell you, I was joking about Jim and I, but some of these folks that do it just for name ID or just for a whole bunch of other reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with the point that they don't have a clue what they're talking about. That's a little bit concerning. I wished when we went to those meetings in the past, I'm going to say myself, and looking after my daughters, when I would go to the public meetings for school board, there were, in fact, I've talked about that on the show before. You'd go there and it'd be 3 or 4 parents, and they're there to defend Sally or Joey that got in trouble, and they're there to attack the teacher or the school system or something else rather than to find out what can be done about the kids. That's just my view. But my overall point is usually it's a big auditorium with nobody sitting in it. And I got to tell you, I genuinely think if we don't save the American family, if we don't do something different with education than what we're doing, we're in trouble, and everything else we're doing is for naught. I believe that. So when I see an educator that's fiscally conservative, as I know you to be, because you've been on the show a few times now,
Yes.
I applaud you for getting involved because it's a thankless job, but you probably know that by now.
Yeah, there's no pay. It's a volunteer position.
Yep.
I've met with the superintendent, Karnaska, and you're actually assigned to school, and you're dealing with one of the schools directly as their liaison, and you have to have regular meetings with them. You're put on committees, regular meetings. Again, it's all at your own expense, time. But when you really see that education is the future, I mean, kids are the future, and if we don't get them in the right path now, then we're going to have generations that we're going to have to fix, and generations within America that will actually not be right in the way we want to go. So I feel it's important. The school board's important. Like you said, people show up, they say their piece, and they leave. I went to a lot of meetings over this year, and it'd be kind of 10, 15 people, and by halfway through, it'd be me left.
Right.
They said what they needed and they left. They hit their points and moved on, instead of hearing some of the other stuff that was going to happen and go on that they might feel affected by.
Yes, it's to me is what I've come to start looking at as the power door society, because people don't have to do anything for themselves anymore, and it's a very, very much immediate gratification society. It's all about me. And so that's a little bit concerning. Listen, stay with us. But before we go on, how can someone learn about your candidacy?
They can go on Facebook. I'm on there, facebook.com/Matt for Grand Haven School Board, and then mattwiedenhoft.com. But the thing is, you got to spell my name. It's not easy. It may be, pronounced Smith, but it's not spelt that way. It's Wiedenhoe. F as in Frank, T and Thomas. And the nice thing is, Justin down at the clerk's office said, Justin, before I do this, does my name got to be spelt right? Otherwise, I might have 2 votes that actually count, and that'd be me and my wife's. And he said, no, as long as it's close.
Right.
So make sure you fill in the bubble. That's key. If you don't fill in the bubble, it doesn't count either.
Scratch in the little bubble with your pencil.
Yes.
And then write Matt Wiedenhoft.
Yes. 2-year term. It's a blank line. And if you don't go in looking for somebody, know you're going in to vote for me. I'm going to be the one who's there as the educator, the one who can help streamline processes.
Matt Wiedenhoft.
And I'm important there. Matt Wiedenhoft.
And you're on Facebook.
Yes, sir.
Hey, stay with us, because Jim Riley and I got to spend the last 4 or 5 minutes talking about how I opened the show, if you don't mind. I quoted myself, America's My Final Beginning book, but then I offered a quote from Jim Riley from his blog, Holy Crapoli, Everyone is a Victim. Jim, what are you talking about, buddy?
Well, there was a vote in Ann Arbor earlier this week. Actually, the city council in Ann Arbor voted 10-0 on Monday, and of course that's a pretty hefty. Everybody's getting along and hugging and singing "Kumbaya" here. And what they voted on was to add protections against discrimination.
Hard to believe that 10 hard-left, feel-good socialists came to agreement.
Well, you would think that hard-hearted conservatives would have been against adding protections against discrimination.
Except for there aren't any there.
Well, but here's where it gets interesting to me, because everybody, at least publicly, would say, "Why, my golly, I'm totally against discrimination." But what they've done is, in Ann Arbor, they currently have an ordinance prior to this vote that provided protections against discrimination on the basis of age, on the basis of color, which I suppose are the standard ones, disability. In other words, you cannot discriminate against someone who has a disability. Educational association, which I found interesting, albeit here it is in Ann Arbor. So perhaps they were saying, look, if you're a university or a Michigan State University graduate, or perhaps an Eastern University graduate, Eastern Michigan University, that you cannot be discriminated against. Family responsibilities, remember, these are the ones already in place. Family responsibilities, whatever that may mean. Gender identity, whatever that may mean. Height, so if you're too tall or too short, or you're just Goldilocks just right, you cannot be discriminated against. HIV status, which is interesting because in theory you could say, wait a minute, we're only hiring people for this HIV clinic who have had HIV. Well, you cannot discriminate against folks who have not had it. Marital status, national origin, race, religion, sex, sexual orientation, source of income, and weight. Okay, now these are already laws. You cannot discriminate. And by the way, the ordinance says that you cannot discriminate on the basis of housing, employment, or public accommodations, which essentially is anything that you would do in public. In other words, you walk into a Denny's and you're not just perfectly tall, you're maybe a little too short or a little too tall. You cannot be discriminated against. Anyway, the new additions to protections against discrimination in these areas are housing. So if you live in a Quonset hut or perhaps maybe a little yurt in the backyard, you cannot be discriminated against. Employment. A victim of domestic violence and stalking. So if you're a victim of domestic violence and stalking, can't be discriminated against. That makes sense. On the basis of gender expression. Now remember, we also had gender identity. I do not know the difference. Veteran status, political beliefs. So if you believe that ISIS should have a right to come stomping in town, and you say that to the person who's perhaps looking to rent his duplex, he cannot discriminate against you on that. Genetic information, again, I don't quite get what genetic information is. Arrest record. So if, in fact, you are the guy who chopped off the heads of the ladies or who stabbed to death the ladies in Muskegon Heights 15 years ago, but never got convicted of it, can't not hire me because of that, or familial status, which I'm not quite sure what that means. But the point is, here's the deal. Everyone is a victim. Too tall, too fat.
I got to tell you something. At Renegade River, there's a sign that says, "We reserve the right to refuse service."
You're not going to see that sign in Ann Arbor, baby.
I'm not taking Renegade River to Ann Arbor. Listen, I'm staying here in America. If somebody comes in and acting a fool, they're going to get tossed right out the front door. I'm not going to, the whole victim nonsense is insane.
Well, the reason I brought this up, and I know we're running out of time, is that we've got a state issue coming up. Maybe we could talk about it next week, because this is important. It will be a state law here in Michigan, adding some of these.
Folks, we will see you and talk to you, if Jim lets us, next Sunday. See you then.